Does Ukraine have a history? Yes, it does. It has so much history that we sometimes have a hard time seeing it. Ukrainian history is like European history, only more so. Like a lot of European countries, the history of Ukrainian statehood begins with Vikings who overturned an existing order and set up their own state. Like a lot of European histories, Ukrainian history involves medieval statehood, a fascinating process in which these Vikings convert to Christianity, bring along the people around them, adopt Slavic languages, create something new. Like a lot of European histories, Ukraine is marked by the Age of Exploration, by the Renaissance, by the Reformation, although quite specially in Ukraine, all of those trends and forces come together, creating a very special country where the mass of the population is exploited by a small part of the population for the benefit of world trade, where the mass of the population speaks a different language than the language of the minority, which happens to be Polish, where the mass of the population is of a different religion than the people who happen to speak Polish and own the land. And this means that already in the 17th century, there's something like a Ukrainian national movement or a Ukrainian anti-colonial movement. That word colonial is very important because in Ukrainian history, especially in recent Ukrainian history, Ukraine has been the object of trends that we tend to think of as global. Ukraine was the object of the colonialism of the Soviet Union. Stalin's idea was that the black earth of Ukraine, the fertile soil of Ukraine, could be exploited to build his own version of empire. The Germans had a very similar idea. Adolf Hitler looked upon Stalin's work in Ukraine and thought, we can do the same thing. We can take the fruits of the labor of Ukrainians. We can treat them as colonial people. We can exploit them as we like to build a German empire. Those two aspirations, Stalin's and Hitler's, overlap in the 1930s and 1940s and make of Ukraine the most dangerous place in the world. But it also means that Ukraine is at the center of this process of colonization and decolonization. Ukraine is at the center of the history of the Soviet Union. It's at the center, the most intense, the darkest focal point of the history of Nazi Germany. So when we look upon Ukrainian history from today's point of view, we also see a country that is European, hypertypically so. It's a post-imperial democracy. It's a messy, confusing country. Like a lot of European countries and American countries, it's dealing with a good deal of diversity. And here again, things are so intense that sometimes we don't see them. Sometimes we don't see this time evidence of success. The Ukrainians have done something that a lot of us, I think, have failed to do, which is to take from their colonial history and to accept a lot of its confusing pieces, to accept that not all the pieces have to fit together, to accept that it's normal to speak more than one language, to accept that it's normal to have more than one culture inside a country, to realize that history isn't just a reaction against all of the terrible things that have come before, but also a realization of what a nation might mean and what might stand for in the future. So when we think about Ukrainian history, we're also thinking about European history and about world history, just more so. It's also intense that it can take a moment to take in, but perhaps that is for the best.